The Trek Geeks Podcast Network is proud to have Fansets as its presenting sponsor. Fansets is the place for amazing pin collectibles with over 200 officially licensed Star Trek pins and new releases every month. Stay tuned for a special discount code good on your next order at fansets.com just for Discovering Trek listeners. Fansets. Our pins have character.
A new time, some new friends, and hope. Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery has blasted off, and now, literally, is where no Star Trek show has gone before. What will Michael Burnham and the rest of the Discovery crew find as they have jumped 930 years into the future? Well, let's find out. Welcome back, and welcome aboard, everyone. My name is Dan Davidson, and we are Discovering Trek. Welcome one and all to Discovering Trek, the Star Trek Universe Companion, presented by Fansets. 18 months. 18 long months. It may not be 930 years, but man, does it sure feel like it. That's how long it's been since we last talked about Star Trek Discovery and the Season 2 finale, Such Sweet Sorrow, Part 2. In an effort to defeat Control in Section 31, Michael Burnham and the crew of the Discovery jumped almost 10 centuries into the future to prevent the annihilation of every life form in the galaxy. Now, as Season 3 opens, we find Michael stranded and alone on a strange planet where things are certainly not as she expected them to be. As always, this is the premier podcast for the most in-depth discussion and analysis about the Season 3 premiere of Star Trek Discovery, entitled That Hope That Is You. Strange new worlds, strange new friends, and strange new enemies all came at Michael from every direction as she realizes that the Discovery may never get to the same planet and the same time that she landed in. You know, I could go on and on. There's just so much to talk about and so many questions about what to expect this season. I'm just going to need to bring in my trusted podcast partner to help me stay on point because I can ramble. This guy is special, people. Maybe I should try and capture him and bring him to a protected planet since he truly is one of a kind. He's my very special friend, my brother in Trek, and my amazing number one. He is Bill Smith. Bill, buddy, we have been waiting for this one for a long time.
We're back, baby!
Yes, we are.
So, by saying you want to put me in a special place to protect me, does that mean you want to put me in a zoo?
You said it, I didn't.
It's good to be back, buddy. I'm psyched to be talking Star Trek Discovery, like you said, for the first time in 18 months. It's been a long road getting from there to here.
Thank you. That was great. That was brilliant. Wrong show.
Oh, sorry about that. And Dan, I don't know if you know this, but you and I are not alone this season. We are shaking things up, just like they're doing on Star Trek Discovery. We're excited to introduce two permanent co-hosts on the podcast who will rotate duties each and every week. You've heard her recently on our coverage of Star Trek Lower Decks, as well as on her own podcast right here on the Trek Geeks Podcast Network, Rewind. We welcome Sara to our coverage of Star Trek Discovery. And Sara, it's good to have you here.
It's so good to be here. Thank you so much.
You know, we had such a great time doing Lower Decks with you and Casey, Sara, that we said, we got to keep it going. We got to keep them on Discovering Trek because it just seems to work. And it only made sense to have you first because you were the gel that kept us together during Lower Decks. So I'm glad you're here because we're going to need that help. So we're very excited.
I was the gel that kept us together. I should have had my own decon chamber moment then.
Oh, you brought that back. Okay. Well, Sara and Bill, we're so excited to be back to talk Discovery Season 3. We've got a lot of things to talk about in regards to the season premiere, but we always want to hear from our listeners about their thoughts. So, Bill, how can they get in touch with us for what they thought of That Hope Is You, Part 1?
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
Well, you know, it's good to be back after 18 long months, and we definitely want to hear your thoughts on Star Trek Discovery's third season. It's really easy to get in touch with us and become part of the conversation. On Twitter and Facebook, all you have to do is search for Discovering Trek. We welcome your comments, your questions, or perhaps your theories on what we might see in Season 3 of Discovery. If voicemail is more your thing, you can head to our website at trekgeeks.com and click on the big blue button. Remember, though, that any comments you leave us might be used in a future episode of Discovering Trek. Dan.
Thank you, Bill.
Black alert. Black alert.
From here on in, this episode of Discovering Trek contains spoilers. So if you haven't watched the season premiere of Star Trek Discovery, stop listening right now. Head on over to CBS All Access or wherever you watch Discovery. Watch the latest episode, then head back on over to Discovering Trek. Failure to do that puts you at risk to find out plot developments and character details for That Hope Is You, Part 1.
Episode 301 of Star Trek Discovery, That Hope Is You, Part 1, is written by Michelle Paradise and Jenny Lumet and Alex Kurtzman, and directed by Olatunde Osunsanmi. Arriving 930 years in the future, Burnham navigates a galaxy she no longer recognizes while searching for the rest of the USS Discovery crew. Originally released on October 15th, 2020, it is the season premiere of Discovery's third season.
Trainees, to the briefing room.
So, Bill and Sarah, here we are. We're gathering in the briefing room, as we will do every single week. And to start things off, we're going to get our high-level thoughts. And, you know, we used a thumbs up, thumbs down previously on Discovering Trek, and then we used pips on Lower Deck. So let's mix it up. We can use whatever we want. I'm just going to throw it out there. You can use pips, you can use thumbs. But we want to get your yes or no on this episode. And, Sarah, we will start with you.
All right. I'm going to go with thumbs. I'm going to give it 2 thumbs up. Absolutely. For me, when a show comes back after a long time, expectations are high, and this episode did not disappoint.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I'm going to give it 2 thumbs up as well. I wasn't sure what to expect in this first episode, and it did not disappoint in the slightest. A whole run of emotions, and I thought it was fantastic. Bill?
Absolutely. 2 thumbs up. This is a good, solid episode, which both conveys Discovery's new direction and also the uncertainty of everything that they're finding. So I thought it was great.
It really was great, and there's a lot of different things that we can talk about in this episode. Of course, we're probably not going to hit them all, but there were some things that we did want to discuss. And it's funny, I was watching the episode for the third time today with my wife before we came up and recorded, and one of the things that I found interesting was when Burnham crash lands on the planet, and she asks the computer if there's life anywhere, and the computer says yes, and she starts screaming, freaking out. I'm like, why is she so excited about that? She doesn't know if it's Discovery. She doesn't know if they're aliens or enemies or whatever. And of course, because my wife is way smarter than I am, she's excited because life hasn't been extinguished from Control. So the mission was a success. And that was something, it took me 3 times to watch it, but that made me really excited to watch that reaction, Bill, from her.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's a very subtle and sublime moment to some extent, but when she lets loose with all that joy, it's because she's literally saved everything. And she even says so later on when she's dosed with the truth serum, which I use in air quotes. But yeah, the fact that there's any life means that what she did worked, and that everybody else gets to go on, which is pretty amazing.
Of course, the very first life that we see on that planet were a couple of bugs, and one of them had a little snack out of the other one, which I thought was kind of funny. That's just me. Anyway, Sarah, one thing that also was very important to note, right in the opening moments of this scene, when she crash lands, she sends the Red Angel suit back up to the wormhole to send that 7th signal. So, in effect, they're really closing the book on season 2 for good, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This is brand new territory. Out with the old and with the new.
Yeah, Bill?
I appreciated that they did that so early on because it ties to the moment in Such Sweet Sorrow Part 2 where Pike and Spock and Number 1 see that 7th signal. And plus that means the suit's no longer in play, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she said a self-destruct too. So, I mean, it's really not in play. So it makes me wonder a whole bunch of things in the scope of this new Star Trek universe, like how Philippa Georgiou is going to get back to Section 31 for a Section 31 series, but that's neither here nor there.
Right. The other thing that I thought was interesting was we speculated last season on Discovering Trek, Bill, about whether we would see Burnham's mother ever again. And I'm kind of thinking with what we saw with the Red Angel suit in the opening moments of this premiere, I don't think we're going to see her again. Do you?
Well, at least not till we get to Terra Elysium, if we get to Terra Elysium.
Yeah.
Because that's apparently not where we're at. So I guess we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, and that's one of the good things about the next. We got 12 episodes to see what happens, so we got a lot in store in this season. Of course, we're introduced with a new character, Sara. Not a new character, Sara, but a new character, Sara, and that's Book. And I got to tell you, I'll have some things to say about Book later on. But what were your first thoughts about Book, and what were your thoughts about how the dynamic between Book and Burnham was?
I definitely found the character of Book to be very interesting to me. I love a good anti-hero, scoundrel, good guy you don't really know. You just want to make sure that you're on their good side. And that's what I felt with the character of Cleveland Book. And the cat. I mean, I love it. I think he was a great character, and I think that there's so much between the two of them that's unsaid. They can already seem to be talking without talking, I find. There's a dynamic there. Mm-hmm. There's mistrust, but trust. It's just the two of them together have chemistry. And I felt that it came out even in the first scenes with them. It was great.
Absolutely. And Grudge actually has his own Twitter account now. Did you know that?
I'm signing up to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill, Sara just mentioned it, and it's one of the things that I was going to talk about later, but I'll talk about it now. When I first saw Book, I got a Han Solo vibe.
Yeah.
And that really came true when he kind of, let her out to pasture, so to speak, when he told her that the communications array was that way, but no, you're going to get arrested now because I sent you to the vault. That was a very scoundrel piratey moment for me, and I'm like, okay, is this guy really going to be a bad guy? We certainly find out later that he is a good guy, and his heart is definitely in the right place.
Well, it's interesting because, there is a little bit of that Star Wars vibe in the open of this episode with the chase, with Cosmo chasing Book's ship, and just Book being a bit scoundrel in the first place kind of gives that Han Solo vibe, kind of like you said. The fact that he's really part activist, part humanitarian, part, save other species, and part scoundrel really adds an interesting quality. Yeah. He's like Starfleet with none of the Starfleet rules. He kind of gets to play on a different playing field, which is kind of cool. And I hope that that's going to lead to some conflict between he and Burnham, or at least more conflict, because I really like the way those two characters pair together.
I thought that the addition of that activist thing, first of all, it was completely unexpected. I liked how they teased us that he had something in his cargo, but we weren't going to know what it was. And then when we did find out, I was like, okay, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Turns out to be a very good thing in the best of ways with what he's doing. Another reason why Star Trek always is right up front with issues of the time. I mean, we're constantly dealing with. I was starting to think of the show with the people that go out and try to save the whales every year with the Sea Shepherd. I think the name of the ship is, that used to be on Discovery Channel. Always trying to save endangered species, and that came to my mind. But as this episode unfolds, and I'll now go back to you, Sara, as we usually go back and forth. We find out that this is, it's 930 years in the future, and something bad's happened, and they call it the burn. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be very interesting, and I'd like to get your thoughts on if we get more detail about what happened. We know that something happened. All the dilithium, as Book said, simply went boom. And that, of course, caused the Federation to fracture and crumble over time. So what are your initial thoughts about the burn?
I was horrified, obviously. I mean, it's Starfleet, and you always want to think that Starfleet's always going to be there. So to think that there's a chance that it might not be because of this event that happened, I don't know what to think. I hope we get more information. I want a lot of information. I want a whole movie about it, but I don't want a movie about it because I don't want to see it happen. But I think it's a great, it's a great way to just change up the story and give us something new to follow.
You have to really hand it, Bill, to the writers, because this is something that, where did this even come from? Let's get rid of all the dilithium in the universe. So theoretically now, the ability to use warp drive is extremely limited, if not gone altogether, because there are dilithium fragments. That's what they use. That's what they trade for in the Requiem. But what used to take minutes to get to another solar system would now take decades. This obviously is the major reason why there's no longer a federation, and I'm perplexed. How's this going to get fixed? That's the first thing that popped into my mind.
My reaction is not perplexed. In this episode, this is the one piece I had a real problem with, because this strikes me as the dumbest idea ever. This is equivalent to saying that everybody's car battery in the world exploded all at the same time or around the same time, that they destabilized to that point and everybody's car went boom. I find it incredibly hard to believe. I would have had a much easier time believing if they had said, oh, we mined all the dilithium to its extinction, for want of a better word. There's no more. And that's what caused the Federation to fracture and collapse. That would have made much more sense to me because it's a non-renewable resource. Or at least we could have learned that it was. But this idea that all of a sudden everything that had dilithium just sort of went boom one day really strikes me as just weak. Unless they put some real context around this and tell us what really happened right now, my first reaction is that's incredibly lame.
Okay. So basically you're giving that a sick burn. Sorry. I couldn't resist.
That was terrible.
That was very bad. I have one other major thing that I want to talk about, but I'm going to save that for last. The last question that I have for each of you is, we didn't see Discovery at all this week, and I know that there have been people online that have been really complaining about that. Sarah, were you upset that we didn't see Discovery this week at all?
No, I wasn't.
Bill?
Nope. No,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sarah.
No. I mean, save it for later.
Okay.
Oh, all right, Bill.
I'm going to say no, not at all, because if you remember season 1, we didn't see Discovery till episode 3.
Yeah.
So I have no problems not seeing the Discovery this week, because who knows what that means in the scope of the story.
It made perfect sense to me, actually. I actually like the fact that we didn't see Discovery. This episode was about Michael getting somewhere and what she needs to do to be able to survive and realize what she needs to do next. And I think a lot of times, if she's on some planet in some time, and then we have Discovery, that whether it's on that planet, a different planet, or in the same time or a different time, going back and forth is just going to cause, people to break down A and B and C stories. And I thought it was great to focus solely on one thing this week. So I really liked it. But the thing that I loved, and Bill, I'll start with you because you and I have had a couple of discussions about this over the last several days. Meeting up with Starfleet and the Federation liaison when Burnham walked into that office and they had that discussion and they raised that flag. Talk about that for a second and what you thought.
I got to tell you, that was probably the most intense and most moving part of the whole episode. Aditya Sahil wakes up the same way every day. His bird wakes him up, his little hollow bird, and he gets in the shower and he cleans his teeth, and his bed turns into the desk or whatever that is with the funky matter stuff. And he's been doing the same thing for 40 years, hoping that somebody would just come around and say, "Hey, I'm from Starfleet." And for him to actually get that moment, where his hope finally pays off after all that time, was just really intense. And I thought it's probably in my favorite moments of all of Discovery so far. And I know that's a bold statement, but it was such a small moment. And by small, I mean very few characters. But it really was resonant for the whole episode.
I 100% agree. It was my favorite moment of the whole episode, and the chemistry between the actors was great. Everything about that scene from its beginning to end was so well done. The musical score, the direction by Mr. Osunsomni, everything was great. The lighting, the slow motion when it needed to be in slow motion. I just really appreciated that, Sarah. Was that your favorite scene of the episode as well? And if so, why? And if not, why?
Absolutely. When you say that it was one of your favorite moments of Discovery, I would take it further and put it in my top 5 for Star Trek in general. I'm not one of those people who gets very emotional over TV shows and movies, and that scene brought tears to my eyes. It was beautifully done. It was beautifully acted. It is essentially what Starfleet and Star Trek is to me. And I absolutely loved it. It was the best part of the episode by far.
It's one of the things that I liked about this scene is that we saw so many different things. At the beginning, we saw the great special effects with this huge star base that is basically in tatters everywhere. And then we get just the human emotion between two actors basically opening up to each other as total strangers. And that really is the hope that we all look for, I think. I thought it was just magnificent. Well, we've reached that moment of Discovering Trek where we welcome back a special segment. It's the time where we take a moment to pause and reflect on those that we've lost in this week's episode of Star Trek Discovery. It's the somber and reflective part of our show, but we feel it's the least we can do for those who have paid the ultimate price. We like to call it the Red Shirt Roll Call.
He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim.
So, Bill, this is a segment that we've looked forward to over the first 2 seasons of Discovery, if you want to call death and destruction a good thing. But it's back this season, and we weren't disappointed this week, were we?
There were entire weeks in seasons 1 and 2 where we didn't have anybody for the Red Shirt Roll Call, and this week, Dan, I don't know if we have enough bottles to pour one out for all of the entries on the Red Shirt Roll Call. So we're going to condense this as much as we can. First off, we say goodbye to an undetermined number of persons at Requiem who were shot with all kinds of newfangled weapons. I mean, that was pretty funky.
Fun stuff.
Oh, fun stuff. Wait, did I really just say fun stuff in the Red Shirt Roll Call? That's not good. Also, we bid a fond farewell and adieu to a few of the security type guys from Requiem who were pursuing Burnham and Book. Made it all the way there to the beach. That didn't turn out so well for them.
Yummy.
One guy got eated, and that was not fun.
Nope.
Ultimately, though, and here's the thing that concerned us, Dan, because we don't really know the scope of this yet. But in the conversation between Book and Burnham, they said pretty much all the dilithium everywhere went boom. So this means that at some point, we could be standing here with mouths agape at the number of people we've lost, because at some point, it could mean pretty much Starfleet. Like a body count in the tens of thousands. And I'm afraid that's probably what we're in store for. But there's no way to be sure. So for now, we're going to say it's like a lot.
Like a lot.
Like a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Like a lot. Well, that's a lot of drinking. But
Yes.
we're going to raise a glass of synthahol as we say goodbye to those that we lost in this week's Red Shirt Roll Call. Folks, we want to take a moment to thank Fansets for being the presenting sponsor of Discovering Trek.
Not only are they an amazing small business, but we are thrilled to announce that they will be with us all season long as our presenting sponsor. Whether it's Star Trek, or Scooby-Doo, or Harry Potter, or a whole ton of other franchises, Fansets has always put out superior products, and we are honored to announce that we will keep this amazing relationship going throughout Season 3 of Discovery here on Discovering Trek.
You can purchase the Star Trek Discovery Lieutenant Bryce Micro Crew pin, as well as the Women of Trek Hoshi Sato pin from Star Trek Enterprise right now on fansets.com. And of course, finally, you can pre-order your very own Star Trek Voyager collector set commemorating the 25th anniversary of our favorite Delta Quadrant stranded crew. Say that 10 times fast. 11 pins and a backer board and a black frame, all for the lowest price ever for a Fansets collector set at just $180.
That's awesome, man. In addition to all of that, you can now pre-order the Lower Decks Delta set. Yep, that's right. The Lower Decks full-size badge pin, the magnet-based badge, and the mini badge are all available to pre-order right now at fansets.com, and they're going to be shipped out by the end of November. And of course, we're thrilled to continue this amazing relationship with Fanset, and that relationship means that you get to save money each and every week with our special Discovering Trek discount code. Just head on over to fansets.com and put a whole bunch of stuff in your cart, gift certificates, pins, clasps, all kinds of stuff. And when you're checking out, enter the special discount code Discovering Trek. That's Discovering Trek in all capital letters with no spaces. You enter that code and you're going to get 15% off your entire order. And don't forget that for our U.S. customers, you're going to get free shipping if you spend $30 or more.
Awesome. Fansets. Our pins have character, and we thank our friends at Fansets for being the presenting sponsor of Discovering Trek.
Of all the souls I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human.
Star Trek has always been a reflection of our times, and in this segment, we like to take a look at what this episode helped us to discover about our very own humanity, or perhaps even what it tells us about ourselves. And Sarah, as this is your first humanity segment and sensor analysis here on Discovering Trek, we're going to start with you.
Oh boy, no pressure though. This is great.
No, not at all.
I definitely don't want to take away from the title of the episode, but I'm going to. This episode to me was about hope and the ability of people to hold on to it for days, years, and even decades. Humanity has faced challenges. We continue to face challenges and will always face challenges. But if you push through, you're patient, and you keep hold of your hope and your unwavering faith, maybe things might turn out how you'd like. The final scene especially stood out to me in this episode, as we already talked about. It was beautiful. It was full of everything you want when someone holds out hope that long. And I think that it's something that everybody needs right now, is to have that proof that if you really give it all of your time and effort, you might just get what you want.
Very nice. Yeah, at the beginning of this episode, we see the Federation liaison, Aditya Sahil, going through the same routine day in and day out. And although we had no idea at the time what he was doing, after the episode, I actually found myself thinking about that opening scene of the rebooted Battlestar Galactica show when a representative of Caprica was at a neutral site waiting for the Cylons to appear, and did that for 40 years with nobody ever showing up. And then they did. But this version of that kind of scene was everything that Star Trek is and everything that it means. This man is the hope in the episode title, That Hope Is You, I think. He says to Burnham that she is his hope, but I think it's the other way around. He's the hope for Burnham, knowing that something so bad happened to the Federation. She needed something to help steer her on a course of action, and seeing this man living every day, working to find someone from the Federation, shows that the human drive has survived. And I thought it was magnificent. He is the hope in all of us. He's what we should strive to be. We need now more than ever to never let go of hope, because like him, hope is sometimes the only thing we have left. And the other quick thing I want to say in regards to this week's episode is Book. And we talked about it a little bit in one of our other segments about the fact that he is risking his life on a regular basis to save endangered species. To know that that type of person exists in the future, so far in the future in the Star Trek universe, brings a smile to my face and a warm feeling in my heart, Bill.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. 40 years. That's how long Federation liaison Aditya Sahil sat at his desk and waited and hoped and persevered. He was willing to lead a solitary existence and repeat the same routine every single day in the hopes that someone, anyone, who believed the same things that he did would walk through that door. Aditya Sahil assumed the role because he had hope, and he stayed and stayed and stayed because he had faith. Sahil is all of us. He's every Star Trek fan that hopes for a brighter tomorrow. He's every human on the planet that wants this world to not be sick and to not spread a potentially deadly virus. He's the voice of a people who are weary, be it because of the restrictions placed in a global pandemic, the illness of a loved one, be it friend or family, or even because of a national election. Aditya Sahil is the hope and faith in all of us. We were told that last season of Star Trek Discovery was an examination of faith versus science, and if the season premiere is any indication, this year seems to be an examination of hope and faith rewarded after perseverance. At least, I hope it is.
Commendations, palm leaf of Axonar Peace Mission, Grand Kite Order of Tactics, Class of Excellence, Prentaris Ribbon of Commendation.
Okay, people, so time for some awards. It's Starfleet Commendations time. Let's see what you picked this week to receive your Starfleet Commendations. Bill, let's start with you, man.
Oh, I get to go first. This is awesome.
Yeah, doesn't happen often.
I don't often go in the same order my notes are in, so I usually jump around and cherry pick. First off, I have to go with David Ajala. I really dig this character of Book. He's an activist and a true believer, and he also is hope. And I think he's played beautifully. Ajala is fantastic, and he really gives Book some great nuance, which I love. And then, we can't talk about this entire episode and not throw out a commendation to Adil Hussein. His performance of Sahil in this week's episode is so moving and so emotional. The moment when his faith is rewarded after those 40 years is just truly just so touching. And it moved me to tears as well. I get that actors give us what's on the page, but this was so much more than just that. This moment was pure, unadulterated Star Trek and was one of my favorite moments in all of Discovery so far, like I said. And then finally, I have to say, SMG gets my last commendation. I am so glad to have Sonequa Martin Green back as Michael Burnham. It's been far too long. This character gets to operate on a completely different level, and Sonequa just shines here. But then, when doesn't she, Gus? When doesn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting that you said that you were also moved to tears. All three of us were moved to tears in that scene, and I think that shows how important that scene was. And I know that Twitter has exploded with people that said that it was their favorite scene as well. Now, I know that everyone, and Bill, we just heard from you, was going to be giving a commendation to Sonequa Martin Green. So I'm going to leave her for later. For me, my highest commendation goes, like you said, to Mr. Hussein as Sahil. He perfectly bookends this episode. At the beginning, we see him and have no idea what he's doing or what he's up to. And at the end, he's the shining high point of the episode as the Federation flag is once again unfurled for the galaxy. It was an amazing performance, and I really hope we get to see him again. Okay, Sonequa, I said it. Who wouldn't list her in this week's performance? I was especially moved by her acting at the beginning of this episode after she crash landed. All of those emotions, high and low, the frustration, the hope that she was wearing on her sleeve for all of us to see. Even her drug-induced rambling was hilarious, and her fight scenes were top-notch, especially that one on the shore with Book. And speaking of Book, my last commendation this week is going to, like Bill did, is going to go to David Ajala. I wasn't sure what to make of him at first. As we talked about earlier, I thought he was cool, but I had that Han Solo vibe, and I kind of had a feeling he was going to do something to show that he wasn't everything he claimed to be, and he did just that. But then he came back, and I think that this character is going to be a strong addition to the cast. And sexual tension much, Burnham and Book? And I'm just going to leave it right there, Sarah.
Well, now that I've realized that Bill goes by SMG, OMG, it's SMG. I give full number one, everything goes to Sonequa for this episode. You know, I am still a huge fan of The Walking Dead. And I loved her on it. She was fantastic. And when she left, I was devastated. And then when I found out about Star Trek, I was like, oh, but sometimes you just get used to somebody as another character. And she's so talented that I see her as Michael 100%. And this episode is why I said earlier that I was okay with the Discovery crew not showing up, because she carried it and she carried it well. And she could be in a plain beige room writing out a grocery list, and I will be captivated by her. She's fantastic. So she's my number one this week. But I have to say, on a side note, Adil Hussein, if I don't see him again, I'm going to throw a hissy fit. Full on truth, because he was fantastic. You see him in the beginning, you don't know what's going on. You're completely lost. And luckily, they don't make us wait. We get the answer in the episode about who this man is and what he has sacrificed. And it was so well played. And I'm so excited for more. And I hope we get lots.
I'm going to love if we see him again and he's got his Starfleet badge on.
Oh, imagine.
That's going to be amazing.
That would be incredible. I hope that he goes with them to some extent. I mean, now that he's found a Starfleet ship, I mean, because he has no idea they have a spore drive and can jump to wherever the other Starfleet ships are. So he can be a part of Starfleet and not just sit behind that desk all the time.
Right. One of the things, Bill, that we talked about last season a few times, and I don't know if criticism is the right word, but it is something that we talked about from time to time, is that sometimes Michael started crying too much in scenes where we didn't know if it really was, you know, the right time to be, and, you know, Starfleet officer and this, that, and the other thing. And I got to say, watching the emotion that we saw from her this one episode wiped out all those criticisms from last season.
Well, see, they weren't our criticisms.
Yeah.
Let's be clear about that, because I've said all along, I don't think she's cried too much. This is a human that was raised by Vulcans and has had to live with some degree of repression her whole life. And she's experiencing a range of emotions to their fullest degree for the first time, including love, because she'd never been in love before season one, including loss, because she never really experienced that either. And I understand that there was a lot to be emotional about. Now, she just saved everybody. I think that she's entitled to all the joy in the world. and good for her.
Long-range scan of planet complete.
So episode 1, we now have an idea, maybe, of what happened with the burn. I'm sure we're going to get more details later on, but what's next for Discovery, people? Bill, let's get your long-range scan.
Well, let's give a little history here, because this is episode 1 of season 3. In the past, we've done the long-range scan. I think I've been right twice in 29 episodes of Discovery. I think that's my average right now.
So you're under the Mendoza line, is what you're saying?
Yeah, way under the Mendoza line. My prediction for episode 1 is this. The Federation is practically non-existent for all intents and purposes, and Starfleet itself is very fragmented. I think that as the season develops, we're going to find we have some new enemies that used to be very old friends, and I'm looking specifically at you, Vulcans. I think we're going to find that the Vulcans are our enemies. I have nothing to back that up. That's just my gut feeling.
That's a bold prediction.
Well, if you'll remember, I make a lot of bold predictions, most of which that don't pan out.
Exactly, right. Yeah. Gabriel Lorca, anyone? Anyway, Sarah, what about you? What do you got?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's clear from this episode that space, in a way, just got a lot smaller due to the inability to scan long range, and it got a lot bigger in the sense that nothing is really known right now. So I'm anticipating that this season's going to be full of a lot of new species that we've never seen before. Definitely some old faces coming back. I'm not sure, though, when you start talking about predicting Vulcans as being bad guys, I wonder if I have somebody I want to predict to be maybe like a good guy. I'm going to have to think about that for next week.
Okay.
All I know is that this first episode has set us up for so much that I can't even begin to pinpoint like a serious guess. I want to put something in there and I want to win it as for this season.
I'm ready. That way once.
We'll have to get a trophy or something. I'll tape something together.
The Geller Cup.
There you go. It's hard to think of what might come next in this season without kind of falling back on what we've seen in the trailers. And that's kind of a cheap way to look at a long-range scan. But basically, there's no warp capability now. So how can any former members of the Federation ever communicate with each other? We learned in this episode that long-range scanners have been knocked out for a long time. Communications, obviously, is probably affected as well. It would take decades to reach Vulcan or Andoria or even Earth based on where Burnham appears to be, and we really have no idea where that is in the scope of the galaxy. But I think Discovery's going to be able to travel to all of these worlds because last I checked, they still have the spore drive. And we know that they're going to get reunited. We've seen it in the trailers. And maybe they're going to be the catalyst for getting the Federation to be reformed somehow. We've seen Andorians. We've seen Lurians. It was good to see a Morn person there this week, and even though he was a bad guy and almost got eaten.
Morn!
And we know that we're going to see Trills at some point. So the familiar species will be there. We're going to see some unfamiliar ones, which we already have. And I think Discovery is the key to getting warp drive established again. Well, here we are. Episode 1's in the books, Sarah. So we get to look forward to episode 2. Unfortunately, you will not be with us for episode 2, so you don't have to take as many notes next week.
Ooh.
But what do we got coming up for next week?
All right. Next week, after the USS Discovery crash lands on a strange planet, the crew finds themselves racing against time to repair their ship. Meanwhile, Saru and Tilly embark on a perilous first contact mission in hopes of finding Burnham in the second episode of the season, Far From Home. Until then, remember that you can subscribe to Discovering Trek by searching for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or by heading to discoverytrek.com.
Plus, now you can support Discovering Trek and the Trek Geeks Podcast Network by subscribing to bonus content via Patreon. Get access to exclusive content and see the second of our annual supporters pins from Fansets, as well as our exclusive Trek Geeks Podcast Network t-shirt, along with a whole bunch of other perks. We want to take a moment to thank and recognize the following amazing producers of Discovering Trek. They are Mike Bovia, Chaz Bradshaw, Ken Bird, Kyle Castillo, Peter Craig, Rachel Delaney, Craig Ewing, Jackie and Chris Hackney, Kimberly Hartman, David Hood, Leonel Marchand, Matt McGonigal, Jim McMahon, Charlie Mulvey, Sean O'Halloran, Jamie Rogers, Casey Shafsky, Chris Tribuzio, Ken Tripp, Christina Werther, and the lovely and talented Jess Vashon.
If you would like to become a producer of Discovering Trek or even get access to the raw audio for Discovering Trek episodes, head on over to patreon.com/trekgeeks, where subscription levels start for as little as $1 a month.
It's really good to be back here talking Discovery, isn't it?
It really is.
Oh, it's so great. I can't thank you guys enough for being here to start this 13-episode journey on 13 weeks. We're going to be seeing Discovery. We're in week 11 of 23 straight weeks of new Star Trek.
Amazing.
And it's pretty awesome.
I need
We're
a
very
drink.
excited. I've got one right here.
Oh, I'm ready.
And Bill, if people want to tell you, actually both of you, I'd like to find out where people can find you on Twitter if they want to send you any drink recipes.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at TrekGeekBill, and I am open to as many drink recipes as I can get. Sarah?
Absolutely. You can find me at Trek Rewind, and I might even give you a couple of recipes.
I got all kinds of recipes, so I'm ready to go. I can be found on Twitter at TrekGeekDan. And that's going to do it for this week in our discussion of the season premiere, That Hope Is You, Part 1. It's a wild jump to the future, and we really look forward to bringing you the most detailed analysis of Star Trek Discovery's third season. As always, we thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to listen to us talk about this amazing new chapter in the Star Trek universe each and every week. We wouldn't be here without your support, and we thank you so very much. And we'll be back next week to discuss Far From Home, and we hope you'll join us. But until then, here are some words of wisdom from Federation Communications Chief Sahil. Hope is a powerful thing. Our numbers are few, yet our spirit is undiminished. And until next week, never stop discovering.
Music for Discovering Trek is provided by 5 Year Mission. They're writing an original song for each episode of Star Trek. Hear more of their music at 5yearmission.net. Discovering Trek is a production of Coconut Media Works. Executive producers Bill Smith and Dan Davidson. For more great Star Trek discussion, discover the other shows of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network at trekgeeks.com or find us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.